I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Kelton.
Here.
Roush.
Here.
Hush.
Here.
Delaney.
Here.
Oliver.
I need a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion by Kelton,
Second.
second by Oliphant. All in favor?
Aye.
At this time, we'll have public comment. You have a limit of 3 minutes per person on agenda items and local government issues. Seeing none. We'll go to number 6, consent agenda, minutes, city council, 6/26/23 and 6/30/23, library board, 7/5/23, July 10th, 2023, claims, and June 2023 financial reports. The Corner Tap Room, 5-day off-premise license for July 26 to 30. If there's no questions, I need a motion on the consent agenda.
Just have a quick question. On the claims report, that for first items, for Absolute Science, I have no idea what that is.
It's for the library. They had one of their summer reading programs. That's a program that they bring in that deals with like all different science things. And it was at the city park last week or 2 weeks ago.
Okay, thanks.
I think historically they've had pretty good turnout when they've had like that. Or I think that's not.
Some sort of science
Okay.
where they bring somebody in.
I do have a question. I was reading through the library minutes, and they mentioned they're having issues with their hotspots. Those are still what I would say fairly new. I think we've only had them a year or two. So one is already broke, and then they're having trouble getting the second of the third back. Like, have they figured out, like, have they been able to get in contact with that individual to get it back?
I believe the chief was working on that.
Yeah, he actually moved out of town, and he's living over in Anamosa now, so we've been trying to work something out. I know his vehicle broke down. He's had quite a bit of bad luck too, but yeah, we're trying to get it back for them.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, they're just not cheap, so that's why I was kind of curious. Thank you. That's all I have.
If there's nothing else, I need a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion by Oliphant,
Second.
second by Hush. All in favor?
Aye.
Number 7, consideration of resolution number 58-23, approval to create a full-time jointly funded marketing, promotion, volunteer coordination, and progress, and create an ad hoc hiring committee.
Okay, so in front of you, Lisa, and somewhere in your piles there, Lisa printed off a sheet here that kind of brings us all the way back to the beginning. It says joint position here. And just to kind of review what this position would be, they would fulfill all duties of the chamber director. That would be at least 20 out of their 40 hours a week. Then, in addition to that, they would communicate with all volunteer organizations on behalf of the city of Cascade. And so this would be fulfilling that volunteer coordinator position recommended by our downtown city assessment. That would include creating a volunteer database and then a way for all of our information to be effectively shared. And then also coordinating a calendar event, which comes all the way back from our Heart and Soul process, which is something that people really said that they wanted from the Heart and Soul process. Then the last thing there is promote and market for all community things, events, and activities. This would be a marketing and a public relations person on the city's half. And then it would also streamline all information in an accessible way. With losing the public access channel, we have to kind of think of what that way might be, but this person is going to be responsible for doing those things. And then below, this person would report to City Council and the Chamber Board. But then below, this is kind of the updated funding total, so the funding that's already secured or available for this. $20,000 from the public access channel. And then the $8,000 would be what the chamber gets from the city. They're gonna relinquish that and give it back to this position. And then $19,000 will come from the chamber to afford this position. So with all of that, we're already at $47,500. However, that doesn't include whatever the benefit package is, and remember that ranges depending on what it was. And we talked about charging that to the TIF district previously. And then on the back, I'm not gonna go through all the benefits again, because really this is the same thing that you've had a month, 2 months ago, but just to have it all there. The benefits to what this position can do for our city and for our community. And then in addition to that, I'm done August 1st, and I don't think they'll be able to fill that position with a part-time person that's qualified to do the job. And so this is helping take 3 part-time positions that we're currently funding with city funds and creating 1 full-time position to get the most bang for our buck.
Personally, I think this is extremely necessary. We heard a lot about this in Heart and Soul, like Haley already touched on. I'm very much in support of this and think that this is something that I would like to see this done and someone hired before August 1st, if at all possible. I mean, I know that's probably not possible, but to get them in here sooner rather than later.
I just don't want to hire somebody just for the sake of hiring somebody, though, because we don't need turnover.
To get the right
Because this is
person.
going to take the right person.
I
also.
completely agree with you, yes, absolutely.
I do have an updated resolution that, at the request of the chamber board, to just make it clear that half of the function is intended to be for the chamber position, that it isn't kind of not intended to be that. So I have and will include that 50% of the time will be allocated towards Chamber of Commerce functions. And then the other thing is, if we want to include in this date, when we intend to, we don't have to keep the part-time position for public access all the way through December if we don't want to. Obviously, we had talked about there were only 300 customers to start with under the channel, or under the phone company's cable. And then obviously with them helping people to start using other tools other than the cable, there's probably less than that, and will be certainly much less than that by the end. So if we want to maybe look at like a September date, give ample time. And obviously Leanne already knows that this is going to not be her position any longer.
Something else too that wasn't mentioned, part of the reason for this position too is to hopefully free up time for Kathy and Lisa. They do a lot of tasks in the office that aren't necessarily within your guys' job descriptions, but it's, somebody has to do them, so you guys can start doing them. But hopefully, some of that will fall into this position as well.
I agree with you, but I also want to make it very clear that like this is the job description. Like I want this stuff to come first, like versus.
But like
as
Lisa's
a
doing
task.
social media
I agree,
and like
yes,
stuff
and
like that.
that's the stuff that like the marketing needs to be done by this person,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I would also say that, like, my personal recommendation is, like, the chamber stuff does not become city stuff, even though this person's doing both, but, like, it's not like the chamber's gonna give up their page to the city, and it's not like the city's page is gonna become the chamber page. Like, they're gonna be responsible for running potentially multiple pages, but for sure, 2. And also, like, you know, like, the website, I mean, that's probably where the calendar will go, so they'll have to be well-versed in how to run that.
And I think what Riley's saying is that where there's voids currently, it's things that just someone else isn't doing, and so we have to fill that in. So if there are things that are under this umbrella, it's not adding city functions to this position. It's these things that have to be done by us right now.
Perfect, yep.
So
Okay.
there's nobody else looking at our website. There's nobody thinking like, hey, every time we have something for an event that it's being added to the website, the only person that's going to do that is me, and I can do some of it, and then I have to push it to Chantel, you know, things like that.
Okay.
Like I can add, pretty much all I add is agendas to the website, and then, but I still have to think of it, create a picture, put it on Facebook, ask her to put it on the website, like, it's things like that where I could say, hey, this is coming up, can you work with this group? Or get this posted, or share this here, things like that.
Okay, thanks for that clarification.
Any
I
other
do-
questions?
Yeah, I do, the idea of phasing out the person overseeing the cable channel and whatever, I think that should be more numbers-based. We have no idea in September how many people will have fallen to the side. I think the pitch was kind of made, you have to decide obviously by the end of the year, but some people may be using it quite extensively towards the end of the year. I mean, until the last moment or into December. So I think it should be numbers-based. In other words, if there's 300 some subscribers, you know, perhaps 100 or some number, because certain people use it, you know, and there's a lot of information on there.
I can reach out to Chris at the phone company and
Yeah.
ask for like a monthly update as to how many people are remaining on their system. if you'd like.
Something else too, when we get to that point, like I know we've created a YouTube channel and like stuff like that to be able to still get this information out, but I think it'd be worth communicating that to our residents just to make sure they still know where to go to find information that they're looking for.
Correct. And I think similar to the phone company, when they've been offering staff to come in and kind of help people sign up for streaming TV options like Hulu or YouTube TV, things like that, we can kind of offer the same thing. Like if you don't know how to, we could bookmark something on somebody's laptop if they don't know how to get to our channel to easily find stuff. And Mike's been helping us kind of get that organized.
Anything else? If nothing, I need a motion on resolution number 58-23.
I'll make a motion on resolution 58-23.
Motion by Oliphant,
Second.
second by Delaney.
I do have a question. I mean, there is a paragraph in there in regards to the part-time public service. Do we modify that?
Do you want to say no later than December 31st? And then if it seems like the numbers are low enough, then we'll just come back sooner?
I would say if we're at half of that 300.
I'm just trying.
Or you can
make
just
sure we're not
strike
passing
that.
this with,
Like what he's saying is the third whereas statement has a date to be filled in. So we either strike that whereas statement and just leave it off for now, or I would say
just strike
it. Are you okay with the
I
motion
can
makers?
amend my motion to that, to strike that.
Strike out the third whereas.
That's fine.
All right.
You're good for a second?
Yep. Oh, sorry.
Yep, I'm good.
Roll call?
Kelchin.
Aye.
Roush.
Aye.
Hush.
aye.
Delaney.
Aye.
Oliphant.
Aye.
Number 8, discussion on the funding and service agreement for the CEDC for fiscal year '24.
So in your packet is some of the information that we've discussed in the past, kind of combined obviously in some of the previous agendas with information along with the decision that you just made. I then included the email that Riley had requested go to the CDC board. It's my understanding that you should have hopefully all got Ken's response on Thursday afternoon. I don't know why I didn't get it. I see that my email was on there, but it's nowhere to be found in my emailers or spam, so I wasn't aware that it was there. But because Riley responded yesterday, then I could see that the answers were there. So hopefully everybody had a chance to either look through his comments, Ken's comments to the answers, which are in the body of the email, and then obviously provided a lot of important information. I think there were 8 or 10 attachments. So I downloaded those and kind of started looking at them. And then Holly had reached out and said that they would be here from ECA as well if there were questions. So I'll just kind of briefly explain, just as a summary, that obviously right now in the past 7 years, you've given $20,000 as part of the conversation that revolved around the decision you just made. There was discussion about whether or not we would continue with the full $20,000. In addition to that position, we obviously have a whole new state requirement, which we tried to explain to everybody last time, that now instead of, as in the past, where you would just vote and have checks being cut to everybody in July, the state law now requires that city councils evaluate all money that goes to a private entity, like the CDC, Garden Club, Jones County, places like that. And so in each of those payments that are made, there has to be an actual service agreement that clearly lists out. And so I know that there's been some tension about the questions that have been posed, but they're really being posed partly because it is a new requirement of the city on top of getting mixed in with this issue of a new position that the city council should be clearly defining, and that wasn't a requirement before. And so, as you know, at the beginning of the conversation, we talked about perhaps decreasing it to $10,000 from $20,000. I know when the CDC board met and reported to us last time that they had requested it only be a decrease of $2,500, which would mean $17,500 instead of $20,000. And then I threw out a proposal in my memo, and again, this is up for discussion this evening. I don't have it on there for an action item, so the intent would be that you'd have 2 more weeks to think about it and perhaps try to make a decision in 2 weeks. But the proposal that I threw out there would be an initial payment immediately upon a service agreement being agreed upon, that we could give them $10,000, and then more information being given to the council each month, where there'd be like a monthly report kind of on the things that have been happening, and that then at the end of the year, look for an additional payment after instead of kind of having this, like, what's been happening in the past, and maybe we haven't gotten the information, or they didn't know we wanted the information, and nobody's fault for what happened in the past, but it could be something where, instead of trying to base it on what you've had in the past, that give them a minimum that they're going to get, and then going forward in May, prior to the end of the fiscal year, we could make a second payment based on what the council feels is appropriate from what you learn from now until, let's pick May, I think is what I said in there. So that would be kind of a compromise, and no, some amount is out there, but I don't know. Ken, you obviously have information that you provided, so if the mayor's good, then do you want to have Ken talk next?
Sure, yeah. Ken McDermott, Vice President, Cascade Economic Development Corporation. First of all, I apologize for you not getting that email.
Yeah, it's on there that you had it. It's not your fault. I have no idea
However,
where
it
it
didn't
went.
come through, whatever, but.
He was like, the email, I was like, what? I didn't see it.
So I want to make clear, Cascade Economic Development Corporation certainly supports the idea of the combined position. We think that that will help organize, get things organize our volunteer groups, and also take some of that responsibility away from the city staff that are doing that now. So we don't want it to make it sound like we don't support the position. We do support the position. We just, I guess, are concerned about funding being taken away from the Economic Development Corporation to help pay for this position, and, you know, do the benefits of this position outweigh what our funding would be reduced. And so we have Holly McPherson and Kelly Deitmeyer here from ECIA that will be able to answer some questions for you here. I just wanted to go over a little bit. I printed out some information that you guys didn't have that I was going to hand out and just go over with you. That just gives a little bit of background on the Economic Development Corporation and kind of some of the funding that they've helped generate for the city through their efforts of in our real estate activities. So if you look at the top portion of the chart there, this is just a summary of the land that the Economic Development Corporation currently owns. We own just short of 45 acres right now, and the taxes, excuse me, that we pay on that land is about $4,700 a year. The next section of the chart is tax revenue generated by land that economic development previously owned and sold for development. And so you can see, and this goes back quite a ways, all the way back to where we sold land to Maryville, and up through our recent sales to R&D Vasky and Nick Callahan. And I guess I'd just point out that those parcels of real estate last year generated about $110,000 in tax revenue. And you can see the assessments for 2022 and 2023 are going up substantially. So, you know, we expect that revenue will increase. The third portion of the chart there is tax revenue generated by land sold from another developer with assistance from CEDC and ECIA to get that package put together, and that was Centro, and their taxes paid last year were about $17,000. And then the last section there is just land that was in the industrial park that has been sold to the city for detention basins, a pump station, a well house, over the years to relationship that we have with the city. And so, and you know, we couldn't give that to you, so we sold it to you for $1 each time. So, so those are just some numbers as far as the funding. And I realize that some of these projects are TIF and that the money goes back to the businesses to help pay their real estate taxes. But even that TIF is only a percentage of that, their taxes, and it's not gonna go on forever. So there will be, you know, a nice revenue stream generated there, and hopefully we continue to develop the industrial park, add new businesses, and, you know, continue to grow that revenue. So I just offer this as support to show that you are getting a return on your investment that you're making to the CEDC. And so I hope that you'll consider continuing to fund us at the level that you have in the past. But I would like to have Kelly and Holly come up, and they would be able to answer questions that you have, and we'll go from there.
First thing I do want to just say is thank you, Ken, and I think Holly, you pulled together a lot of the information. So thank you guys for sending that.
Sure.
Like, they really are just questions that I have. Like, I've only ever, like, it's been a while since you guys have really come to council and really provided a lot of this information. So it really is just curiosity, wanted to know so we could make the most informed decision for the city. So.
And it's been really beneficial for me being new to council, so thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Well, thank you. I'm Kelly Detmeyer, Executive Director with ECIA, and this is Holly McPherson. She's our, well, human resource slash region. She does a lot of our regional economic development as well. So thank you for having us here this evening. It's always good to come and visit. Actually, this goes back about 7 years when there was a previous city manager who emailed our previous economic development director and just said, hey, we're looking for hiring an ED person, but we think partnering might be a better option because we really only have $20,000 to hire someone. And we said, well, you're not even going to get a good part-time ED person for $20,000, but we could talk about partnering with you to be able to provide some of the services that you're looking for. And so that's when we developed this scope of work and a contract and said, a lot of times we will do extra work for our communities above and beyond your membership fees, which I can explain that in a little more detail as well. And so provide staff for services that you don't necessarily have the money to hire staff for. So we always say ECIA is that extension of city and county staff. Well, in this case, we're an extension of the economic development group and the staff that they needed to provide services for the city and for themselves. And really their whole point of the ED group is, you know, they hold land, which the city typically doesn't want to hold land. So they're holding land on behalf of the city and trying to expand and grow the community. So we have provided those services. Actually, it's been Holly and Matt, not me. I'm behind the scenes. But they actually I filled in though. You were on maternity leave. Yeah, I had to fill in twice. Yeah, that was no more babies though. Yeah, so I had to fill in twice, 12 weeks at a time, but for the most part, they do all the work. But just also membership fees, because like you said, you're new to the council, you don't really understand what's that all about, what does that mean? And I'll give you a little bit of information. Do you mind, Mayor, if I just pass this out really quickly? I brought this tonight, just so you could see some of the things that you get just for your membership fees. Would you just mind passing them that way? Okay, thank you.
To be clear, when you say membership fees, you mean the city being a member of
The
ECIA,
city.
not the EDC?
Right, so the city is a member of ECIA. So we have 71 municipalities that are members of ECIA, and all of them pay a membership fee based on per capita. Then if you want services above and beyond that, so you say, oh, I want a land use plan done, I want my city code updated, I would like services for the economic development group for you to provide staffing, then we sign an additional contract above and beyond. So take, for example, your membership fees, our per capita is 74 cents per capita. And so you have 2,386 is the population that we're using. In FY23, you paid $1,360, which was really 57 cents per capita, because Dubuque County, they're the only county that does this, and they always asked why. And I said, well, when we were formed in 1974, you felt very generous at the time, or those supervisors did. They subsidized your membership fees by 15 cents per capita. And that's, like I said, we have 5 counties, we're the only one that does that. So for FY24, you'll pay $1,407.74 based on 59 cents per capita.
So the county's subsidizing about $358 of your membership fees, and they do that for all the communities. So then you're a member of ECIA, and you say, well, what does that mean? What do you do? So, for example, this is just a list that we kind of put together quickly. Highway 136, we're a regional planning affiliation, and you needed some money for that project. So because we do transportation planning, Lisa was able to work with Chandra and come up with $120,000 for that project. We operate the housing authority for the 7-county region, actually. We go all the way to Bettendorf. And so because we do that, anybody that is in your community can receive rental assistance. So last year in FY23, there was $120,789 in rental assistance through our organization provided to the community. So if you weren't a member of ECIA, anybody that needed rental assistance in the city of Cascade wouldn't be able to live here because you're not a member of ECIA. So that's how that works. We also have, we do SBA RLF loans, so we work with the Small Business Administration. We're the only council of governments of Iowa that's able to do loans, 504 loans through the Small Business Administration. So there's some loans listed here, one of them to CLH Repair. We also do EDA loans, Economic Development Administration loans. We have revolving loan funds that we do. So NOPAR was one of them. I don't know if I'm saying that right, NOPAR. And then also CFG, which is an operating company for Cheryl's Flower Garden. We were able to do a loan for them. So these are just a few of the things that we do. We also had a Hometown Pride program, so we created the map and the sign that was out there through Hometown Pride. But basically, anything that you think, oh, you know what, we might need help with this, or we have a question on this, you just give us a call. We try to answer those questions and try to assist in any way we can. Then on the economic development side, that's when Holly comes in, and she can give you all the details on that and how that contract works. And as I said, the most valuable thing we have is our member governments. You know, we work for you. That's what we're here for. So at the time, you know, that council thought it was a great idea for us to provide staff to ED Group, and the ED Group was very pleased with it. We'd love to continue that partnership because it's worked really well. But if it's something that you, the council, says, absolutely not, I do not want you working with the ED Group, even if they decide they want to pay us to do it, I would never get between the council, the city, and us, because you are our members. We work for you. But if you say, you know what, it's fine, you continue your partnership with them, and we will continue, you know, to pay them, or we're only going to pay them half, and they're going to pay the difference, whatever, fine, we'll continue doing that. But as I said, our relationship with you is the most important. Even though we love Ken and Brad, we love working with them. But if it's something that, you know, you decide, heck, get out of town, just only do what we want you to do for our membership fees, that's what we'll do. So I'll turn it over to you for the economic development piece.
So just first of all, thank you so much for letting us be a part of your community the last 7 years, because when we're part of the ED Group, I feel like we're just part of so much more than just membership dues, you know, membership dues. But and it's a little different than other COGs in Iowa. We have a full service COG where some COGs just do transportation and planning, and it's important to know that we're called a super COG. So I just want to throw that out there.
During the floods, we were the super COG.
Yes,
you know,
that's what they call us.
Yes.
So anyway, I thoroughly enjoyed working with your community, with all of you, with the ED Group. You have a wonderful community here, great volunteers, great donors. I'm super jealous. I live in a community where we're about losing our pool right now. So anyway, I just want to throw that out there. As Riley had emailed, when was it, last week? I don't know if you guys got those responses or not. I know, Lisa, you mentioned.
I think everybody did.
Okay, did you guys all see those? Okay. Did anybody have any questions about any of the content in those, as far as, we usually come here once a year, and that was, I had kind of mentioned to Lisa one meeting, but I never kind of followed back up, so I apologize, we could have been here. We usually come this time of year, but your agendas look a little full right now.
Yeah.
But, you know, we're happy to come out anytime, really. So just, if you have any questions about any of that material, as far as any grants we've written, anything regarding business calls, let me know. I mean, I'm here now, and I'm an email away or a phone call away too, so I won't reread everything to you again, but.
Just a clarification too, I think there was one question about why is GDDC, Greater Dubuque Development, why don't they do some of this? And actually, at the time, they didn't really have the staff to provide staff to the ED group. And they typically make the bigger business calls, so like we partner with them and they will go out and make the larger business calls, but they make the calls on the smaller downtown businesses, the smaller groups. So we have that partnership that we work with GDDC, but they don't necessarily take minutes for your meetings or get the agendas out. They're more bigger picture of if there was a company that was looking at, you know, Cascade, they would definitely get engaged and get involved.
So I think where that comment came from is that Rick was here to provide their annual report, which if you remember, Rick is the head of the Greater Dubuque Group. And what he said was, and I have seen this happen, and I think part of it is when we think more in our own boundaries or we think more regionally.
Right.
And so when we start talking about a land deal, we asked Jason White at the EDC meetings to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And because they are, I think that was his response, was to say that he knows that his staff at our board meetings, when he's a liaison, just like I am, just like when the chamber person can come, Derek from Jones County, like everybody leaves. And so then it feels, I think in Rick's eyes, that's how I interpreted that, was that we in Greater Dubuque could be a resource because they do tend to do some of those bigger projects. But you're asking us to leave. And he was saying, like, we can all be working together. And then sometimes I think, like, I've been parts of where it's a county-wide position, more like it is in Jones County, and everybody doesn't have their own community ones, like we're lucky enough to have here. And so I think that was the context of that comment, was that maybe we need to, and I don't know if it's people are afraid to say like, oh, well, if we have you here, then you're gonna perhaps suggest it to somebody else in Dubuque County. And typically you see that the communities sort of already know where they wanna go. And it isn't like a big competition between 5 communities in Dubuque County. They're looking at different areas and it's not as common for that, so.
I don't know, I mean,
Yeah, I'm gonna say.
And that is
Yeah.
exactly why I asked that question. Because like Rick came and then like they're just supposed to be this great resource.
Right, and Brad Ludwig, president of Cascade Economic Development Corporation. One of the comments with that is there is times when we get them involved in a land deal, and other times we don't feel it makes sense to utilize all the resources. There has been a case where we were in competing communities, and you know, how do we go about that? So we take it on a case-by-case basis more so, and so that if we think we don't need the resources and we're progressing along, we're just going to talk about pricing, then we don't. Then to me, it doesn't make sense to, you know. But that's typically how we handle it.
Okay.
and usually, I mean, we already had, like, the owner was already interested, and it's one of those things where you don't want a lot of, like, it's the board member's decision, and so that's why it's like you guys having a closed session, similar to that.
We're just telling you the context of the question
Right.
because it was said
And
by
I'm just trying
them.
to,
Yeah.
to let you know kind of our side of it too, so.
Well, and sometimes it's confidentiality, you know, like, Central came through Iowa Area Development Group, you know, just a different organization that was leading it, that was providing the resources, that was, that's where the lead came from. So to include more people into the pot, it can get a little bit more confused.
Just muddies it a little bit more.
That's it. Anything else?
Yeah, I was just going to reiterate what Brad said. We do look at GDDC as a partner, but they're also competing. They have an industrial park. They have a lot of money invested in that industrial park, and they have a lot more incentives that they can offer that we can't offer. And so it's important to keep a little bit of separation there when we have a business coming in, so that, you know, if the business is looking for a proposal from us and then GDDC decides they're gonna give a proposal, you know, then, you know, we're competing against them for that. And so we do have to keep a little bit of separation and confidentiality from that standpoint as well.
all my questions have already been
You
answered,
good?
so.
I think one thing that would maybe be helpful, I know that in Ken's response, you had about the confidentiality of state proposals. So I've obviously worked on those myself, and I've signed those confidentiality agreements and drove people crazy in the city that I worked in, where I was literally the only person in the city who knew who it was, and we could never disclose it. But I think what would be helpful is, for example, in that case, we had the public side of it was, as you know, like IEDA gives a name to every project. So when you get those proposals, like mine that I worked on that we, were very successful on was Project Silver. So that's the name of it. You know that it's a business like this industry. So we knew in that case it was a meat manufacturing. So we were dealing with a lot of sewer plant issues and BODs. We knew that they needed 100 acres. We knew that they were going to bring 400 jobs in a 400,000 square foot facility. That stuff's not confidential. And so I think what would be helpful, like I know in my 15 months, I'm guessing that we didn't do any, because I think that in most cases you wouldn't be able to answer those questions without at least talking to me, because there's almost always utility information, like can you accept this kind of a BOD limit per day? Do you have this level of water to provide with, based on how many gallons you need from us as our customer if you were to come here? And so I think in the context of that question, I don't think anybody's asking for the confidential side of it, but I think it would be helpful to just understand for the past, like you have provided a ton of other great information, is not suggesting that you're disclosing confidential information, but because what I see, especially in a small community, is many of those proposals that come from the state, we're just not even going to be in the right ballpark. Like, we don't have a ton of land. A lot of them are 50 acres, 100 acres. And as we know, like, we have barely 50, and we have a pretty uniquely shaped lot. And so you can't even really count some of that in a true rectangular, genuine 50 acres, because you kind of narrow up when you get towards First Avenue. So I think the only thing I would add to, like, if there's more information, that would be the one kind of gap that I think probably could still be provided to the city council. That's not disclosing anything that was confidential, but would help everybody to understand, like, what's the actual volume of proposals, because that was a big focus, obviously, of what Ken and Brad talked about last time, was having you on board, being able to do that. Like, I've done those too. We're going to have to do it together if you do one, because it's like I can't answer everything sometimes, and you can't answer everything sometimes. So maybe that would just be the one kind of information. I think everything else was great that you provided.
Yeah,
and
and like you said, there's not a ton of them, so we.
From the state, there's so far
Anymore,
You
I
have to
feel like-
generate your own, or like
Yeah.
this last one was Iowa Area Development.
Right.
Yeah. I
Well,
mean,
that was
I
just that what they
had
heard,
one that I
right.
had sent, they were looking for a building, and so I reached out to the owner, and it wasn't gonna work. I mean, so I didn't even go as far as calling Lisa.
Right.
It
And I know
was-
Jason White had called one time since I've been here, and I was like, well, we just don't have anything. And a lot of times you are dealing more with those sites when you're talking about Davenport, Dubuque, like bigger communities that have larger industrial parks with larger tracts of land.
And I've
Because,
had them even for meat, and I'm sure you guys don't want food being made over there next to all your houses.
well, and it's not even, if
You know,
if
I
we
was-
can, like, you just can't, you can't accept those levels. Like, we even have companies here already that will try to, like, want to add something to their operation, and then when we go to the DNR, like, our plant is little. And so if you try to, discharge something into a small plant, it's a lot bigger disruption to the bugs in a wastewater plant of 2,300 people than one factory going into Dubuque's wastewater plant. It's just different. And so a lot of times that limits, and the state and those proposals, they don't really dabble in little projects. Like, they don't propose those. And so I think that was kind of the balance of what the council was listening to, kind of the reasons why the EDC wants to make sure you're still on board, and then kind of understanding where, as a part of the package that you've provided to them for these 7 years, like, how often that happens. And so any kind of information like that would also be helpful, or if it's, at least going forward.
Well, some of the things too, it's not just about proposals. It's about, like, the workforce. There was, before COVID, there was a big emphasis on workforce. There still is a big emphasis on workforce. So Holly was doing a couple of different events focused on workforce. And so it's not always about the proposal, as we all know. It's really about retaining and keeping people here.
Especially with like recent surveys, when we're downtown reviving, stuff
Right.
like that. So I feel like, your concentration shifts a little bit for the times, and that contract hasn't been really revamped since the
Yeah.
beginning. So, I mean, we can always take a look at that too, if that's something you guys want, something else or what have you. But,
Mhm.
you know, we started that contract like shooting from the hip because it was,
Yeah.
we were doing this as a brand new kind of
Mhm.
third-party service to the EDC. So, yeah, I mean, if there's anything that needs to be modified or anything like that, we're open to that, of course, so.
Definitely, yeah.
Going back to what Kelly said too, so how, like, as I read through like the PowerPoint, Holly, you mentioned that you guys basically put on the hiring call. Like, I didn't know that
Yeah.
that was even EC, or ED, Economic Development and ECA, too many acronyms.
Mhm.
Like, I didn't know that you guys were even the ones that put that on.
Oh, yeah.
So like, I think communication can go a long ways.
Mhm. I would agree 100%.
Both ways, from us as a
And
city.
we understand you were getting our minutes every month. I think in the past you might have been, I don't know.
And I think we do from time to time, but
Because you should get them every month, so, I mean, I believe they go to Lisa.
Mhm.
It goes.
But yeah, that's helpful with the minutes, but, you know, if there's reporting that you want done periodically, if there's, as you said, Lisa, you know, if they say, oh, we want you to come monthly, or whatever you set out to do, that's fine. You know, we have no issue with that at all. But yeah, ECIA is typically, and I think we're behind the scenes. We're here to provide support. We're not really out front. So when the hiring call happened, we're here facilitating that. We don't put our name on it.
I mean, when I call people, I say, I'm CEDC staff.
Right, we don't
I don't say I'm
say-
ECIA, because they'll be like, who? What are you?
Yeah, they don't know
You
us,
know,
yeah.
like, even to order food, I'll say, I'm CDC, or, you know,
Mhm.
ED group or whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just, I just look at it as I'm a staff person for them, so,
Mhm.
not necessarily the ECIA.
But even going to like Ken's email, like, you mentioned a lot of stuff in there that I had no idea that you guys had a hand in. So, first off, thank you, but.
Communication is a good thing.
But yeah, communication I think can go a long ways.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think what the intent was, although I think it all kind of perhaps got taken in a direction that wasn't intended, is that my experience with COGS, like obviously you have your colleague Denise or your, you know.
We're very different. Our
Right.
COGS are like night and day. They're
Right.
very focused on planning and really pretty much only planning and transportation, and we do A to Z.
Right, but the point, like you said, though, is that a community's need for you will ebb and flow.
It
And
does,
so,
yeah.
where we were not trying to be offensive when you just said, like, get out, like, if we don't want you to work, I don't think anybody was ever saying that, because we obviously value you, or the city council would not have signed up for building inspection. So my
Very good
example
point.
to the council
Mhm.
was that, let's just say we were lucky enough to grow big enough to justify a full-time building inspector. We wouldn't want you to be offended that we were saying, like, now it's time for us to be a big kid, for lack of a better way to say it, and now we're ready to have that. And so all we were saying as a part of this entire conversation that came from the downtown assessment and having a full-time position is, do we want to review the items that are an addendum and say, if this is what we've been paying $20,000, and now we have this full-time position, it is not meant to replace you or get rid of ECIA. It was meant to say, are there a few things, because we're now investing our dollars over here somewhat differently than we have been for all the years that we couldn't afford to be a big kid in this area, kind of thing, that maybe there's a few things that make more sense to have under that full-time umbrella, and we can just pick like an easy thing, and not that it's $10,000 worth of your contract, but let's just say the website. If somebody's already doing the website and you're already kind of under our website umbrella, maybe it makes more sense for us to be giving that information to that person. And what is that as a part of the value of your contract? And that's the ebb and flow part, that like maybe it's not exactly 20, and that it's not just, this is what you've always done and it's the same always, but I don't think anybody here ever thought you're not valuable, that the CDC is not valuable, that partnership is. It's just like we wanted to use you in a different way, adding to our services and building inspection, maybe there's something that's different. But at the end of the day, that's up to the EDC, because technically that contract is with you, and that was just kind of trying to value like the dollars going out, and it is a different evaluation right now because of the state's requirement on the council to create these service agreements and think about it more intently than people had to do in the past, and provide receipts and do things different. And when the auditors were here last summer, they're like, we will be back next year, and we expect there to be like specific contracts with each group. And so that's what the council knew, and all of that kind of has transformed in this conversation. But I don't think anybody thinks that you're not valuable to Cascade, and we appreciate everything that you do. We appreciate everything that EDC does, and now it's just in a couple weeks, we can kind of talk about, is it just an automatic dollar amount, or do we kind of figure out where that goes partly up front, and then perhaps with better communication between both sides, be able to determine at the end of the year a better tool to be able to come up with that second payment is, again, more city to CDC, not city or to you, or it's, between you two for your contract. So just want to make sure that no one thought you're not doing a good job.
No, I didn't get that impression at all, but I just really want to make sure that you know that if it's, ECIA works for you. We work for our member governments. And this is a contract where we work for them too. But again, I value that in my 22 years, every city and every county have been a member. I was at ECIA when I was an intern when one of the counties dropped out, and it was a nightmare when you had to move everybody out of the county that was on rental assistance and say, you cannot be in this county. And so I've just very much, whatever our cities need, whatever they want from us, that's what we try to do. And, I don't ever want to get sideways that way.
We appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. So that's most important. But anyway, thank you very much for your time. I much appreciate it. And
Thank you.
I will not see you at the mayor's meeting because I'm going to be out of town. So. But thank you.
Brad Ludwig again. Just wanted to, one last thing, ECIA, two last things. One, ECIA has been, every time we call them, they turn things around, I was out of town a few days. Holly had that to Ken, and I Friday after, the response to all those Friday afternoon, Ken worked on, and I worked on Saturday morning. But they've been a great asset for our organization. I don't know where we'd be today without them. Lastly, just to clarify, so what you're proposing is reducing our revenue by 50%, and then if we reach a set of requirements, we get the other 50%, or I guess I'm confused of what that would look like. I don't know how much more than minutes that you want them on a monthly basis. Are your requirement going to be you come here every month? Lisa comes to the CDC meetings. Part of that was hopefully to be a liaison between the two organizations to keep each other informed of what was going on. So I guess that would be the next question is, what requirements are going to be made of CDC to meet that other second half? Or is it going to be half? Is it going to be just an arbitrary number? It's hard for us to plan, not looking forward, not knowing what our revenue stream is. So that'd be my question to the council. What have we done, first of all, differently this year than we've done in the past? I know the contracts are different, but are you getting a $20,000 value from Cascade Economic Development Corporation? And if you are, why are we getting a 50% reduction in revenue? So.
I don't think it was intended to, well, like I said, the highest number that came up was 50%. You came back from the board saying, you put on the table the $2,500. And then I think what some of the council members had talked about was there a middle ground between the 10 and the 17.5. And then my point in my memo, if you saw it in the packet, was that, and part of, I think, there's been comments or questions last time about why is the focus here, but the largest contribution that we make to any single organization is the CDC, so there will be more conversation just by virtue of that. It's not meant to be negative towards the CDC, but there's that number. And so my proposal was it would be a max of 15,000, and that later in the year to determine the second payment of 5,000, which is somewhat, it's not the 10,000 and it's not as high as the 17.5 that the board would have, in your conversation, you had talked about a reduction of 2,500.
Do you have a proposal out there, Lisa? I didn't get the packet, I'm sorry. Oh.
If you scroll.
Page 20.
And
That way, if
26,
you could just give me a
Mike.
copy of the proposal, that would be good.
And as a council, we've never discussed it.
That was me.
That was just Lisa putting what she's had conversations with people to kind of get to a number.
Page 26, you're too far.
Okay.
27.
6, backup one,
Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Brad.
Thanks, Brad.
maybe.
Sorry, I just.
25, sorry, glasses.
Just one more
right there.
comment.
But yeah, I can send it to the group.
Certainly appreciate that we are the largest contributor, the organization that you contribute the most money to. But I also would appreciate you taking into consideration the information that I sent out and the amount of revenue that the CEDC has helped generate to come back to the city versus, and I don't want this to sound like the other organizations aren't important, because every one of them, we would all agree are, but that monetarily, you know, we're able to quantify what does come back to the city. So just ask you to keep that in mind as you're making your decision.
And again, I had to write my packet on Friday, and then I didn't see that stuff till Sunday. So that was my intent, was that I knew you would be providing information and didn't think it was fair to the council to have to make a decision this evening, which is why it's only on there for discussion, and that gives everybody time to think about it. And we can discuss it in 2 weeks, so that's why we weren't trying to kind of railroad it through without everybody having a chance to provide the information. Like I said, by accident, I just didn't have that. And everybody has it now, and then we can proceed in a couple weeks.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense to have some time to think about it and make your decision.
Ask other
from there.
questions, right? So we appreciate all the information.
Yeah, and like what you guys provided really does paint a much clearer picture of everything that you guys really do, truly do, and touch. So I really do appreciate you guys sitting that.
Well, and I appreciate you we appreciate you asking the questions too,
So,
because,
and I think, I don't want to get overlooked either, because I think that's what's the great thing about this discussion, is that we had this number, we had these position that we're looking at some of the stuff changing, and we are all in a room going, okay, this is what is being provided, this is what we get, and we're kind of looking at this whole thing going, okay, how do all these pieces fit together and go through? It isn't you're doing a bad job, or you're doing a bad job, or it's just looking at the bigger picture of the information. And as you provide more information, then we all get a painted picture better. And then we can kind of look at what fits into this position, what doesn't fit in this position, how it will benefit you, how it won't, and kind of that go around. It's not I don't think it was ever, I don't think anybody here ever thought it was like you guys were doing something,
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Where ECIA wasn't doing.
Absolutely.
It's always
Yep.
been more of a kind of
Yep.
figuring out. And so
I mean,
this is great.
the
We're
more
getting
information you have, the better decision you can make,
Right.
so.
Yeah, so
We
kind
appreciate
of pulls
your
everybody into it.
consideration.
And even in the minutes, the minutes are valuable, but the minutes don't give this picture. Like, everything that
Right.
you just provided to the council is not the kind of stuff that's in the minutes. Like, we don't see the average score of the business meetings. Like, the minutes don't ever say, like, who Matt went to go meet with, on a monthly basis. And so all of that stuff, like, and I said the same thing last time, like, I'm new, and so I have no way of knowing any more than, some people on the council have been here a long time. Bill's been in the organization a long time, but Megan's the newest council member, and the only way we learn is by asking questions. And unfortunately, sometimes those questions get received as people having negative feelings, like Mike said, or feeling like you're in attack mode and why are you asking this? But there's only one way for all of us to learn and be better informed about it. And so hopefully, again, I reiterate that it was never intended to be perhaps how it was received. And so I apologize if that's how it came off, and we appreciate the information so that all of us know better where everything fits together.
Yeah, and I would just say, we appreciate the council's willingness to work with us, because we've had, councils change, positions change, but I think the council that we have now is as open as any that we've had to try to do the right things for the city, so we do appreciate that.
Thank you.
And one thing we talked about last week, like, we're a partnership. Like, you guys can't do what you want to do without our help, and we can't bring, like, businesses to this community without your guys' help. So, like, it needs to be open communication and us always being on the same page, working together to really, it's the same ultimate goal of making Cascade a better place. And
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you.
Thank you
and
guys.
thank you to
can
the rest of the
work
board
on
too,
it.
like, appreciate everything you guys do.
Thank you for everybody taking the time to get
Yes.
the info.
Especially on Saturday morning, thank you.
I'd like to make a quick comment, though, in regards to Brad's question about what the evaluation would look like. I think we kind of covered it, minutes, maybe a little more information in the minutes for the council. I mean, not names necessarily, anything they have going on that way, obviously, but just a little bit more information might be helpful. The other thing is, I kind of like the idea of going with the evaluation, but I think it's stated as being May of 2024. If we go that route, I think we should probably move it up to the end of this year. And I'd like to see quarterly, perhaps representatives meet with us quarterly at meetings. In other words, sometime in October, sometime in end of December, January.
So you're saying do the second payment, like have the 10,000 and then eligible for a second payment sooner
I
than
think that's
later?
fair, and
That's fine.
it'd be just a good opportunity for us to meet with each other's, the groups meet with each other, and keep everybody better informed of what's going on.
I would agree with on that aspect. I mean, as my wife tells me all the time, if it doesn't get scheduled, it doesn't happen. So I think having something on the books that we're going to.
Yep, so think
meet
about all
with
that,
good
and we can
and put
tweak
it
that for
together
next
and,
week,
yeah,
or next
have
week.
something on books where we're constantly in communication.
Excuse me, Jesse Meyer, board member of the CEDC and former president of the Chamber of Commerce. So I had the luxury of being on both sides of the coin a little bit, and I just would like to commemorate these guys for doing a lot of hard work. Ken and Brad, and putting a lot of time into it. You're looking at a volunteer board of directors, right? And that's trying to better the city, to get more business in here, more housing in here. And I guess I agree with you, quarterly, I haven't talked to these guys about that, but I agree with you, quarterly update would probably be appropriate so the communication lines are open. I'd also consider that, or hope that you would consider to leave the 20,000 or close to it where it's at. And if you feel like after these quarterly updates, like, year 2 or year 3 or whatever, that you're not getting the value there, then look at it. But I really don't feel like cutting the CEDC by 50%, the point of that money is to try to enhance the city and bring businesses to it and get lots, get the ground ready, and I just think that, I'd like to see you consider leaving it where it's at or close there to it.
Thank you, Jesse.
So I'll place this back on the agenda in 2 weeks.
Thanks, everybody.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you again for everyone for coming out tonight.
Number 9, consideration of ordinance number 08-23, vacant building registration, and this is the first reading.
So on your table, there was a one-page amendment to the ordinance based on Bill's question. So if you see, there's like blue writing on the one page, some underline, strike through. So you'll recall, those of you that were here, Bill asked the question about, number one, if there was a market value and the property was up for sale. And then remember, we also talked about the lease, and we all kind of said, like, good point to Bill, that like, how are we going to determine that they're not just saying it's up for sale and saying it's up for lease, and that it's some crazy number that really
Price it out of the market.
Right, isn't practical. So when I presented that to Steve, our attorney that's working with us on this, he thought that was a good point. And what he has altered here is that, number one, we're taking the lease completely out of it. Just because it's up for lease, if it's vacant, we're still going to do the registration and walk through it. And no harm. Like, remember, this was being exempt from having to register your vacant building. That was under the exemptions of if you have it up for lease or if you have it for sale, then you don't have to register. So he took lease completely out of it because that's more difficult to quantify, like what's the value of rent. Whereas on the real estate side, if you had it up for sale, if you have it for no more than 150% of the assessed value, that or lower, then you're eligible to be exempt because you have it up for sale. But if you have it more than, so if it's valued at $100,000 and you list it for $200,000, you're not exempt because we may have concerns. So again, you can sell it for whatever you want. It just means that while it's vacant, you still have to register it. Okay, so we're not like saying we're trying to limit how much you can sell it for or whatever. It just means if you're higher than 150% of the assessed value, you would still have to register it. If it's 150 or less, you would be under the exemptions for not having to register your building. And if it's only up for lease, you still have to register it as a vacant building. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So basically, Bill kind of called it a loophole. We've sort of, I feel like Steve feels like good point, and we've closed that hole. We can define the market, and we're not putting the leases on there. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So if you were going to consider this as a first reading, the suggestion would then be with this revision. That's the version that you're approving for the first. Bill, did you have a question? You kind of looked like you were going to.
So the lease, so it has to be registered, which means what exactly?
So the registration is all the rest of the ordinance where it says you have to like register it, we get to come and look at it. If there are things that we need you to do, you're gonna have a timeline to fix it up. And the whole point of this, remember, is that when you have businesses downtown, and we're only doing this for commercial and industrial, when businesses are open to the public, we all know if there was like a flaw in the building. We can see and affecting your neighbor. And so, if it's now up for lease, you have to register it. And then you go through that whole portion of the
So the
ordinance.
only way to avoid going on the registry is if your building is for sale for less than 150% of the assessed value.
That's your exemption.
Otherwise, you are on this list.
Correct. You are going to register and we're going to come and look at it and see like what kinds of things, make sure. Because again, we have like the buildings that we have received concerns about are all would be on this registry. We would be able to go in there and not wonder what it looks like because you're not open to the public and so. And this is an added on top of, like, I'm addressing it right now with the building inspector and the attorney to deal with the nuisances that we can see from the outside. But this is really how communities are addressing it, so it isn't just based on the outside, is that we define a vacant building and now we can come in and look at it.
Well, what actions after that, though?
Well, you'd have to go through, I mean, it's,
I mean, I just know of a building that's totally, has a roof, nothing's falling off it.
so if we
that
come
thing-
through there and all those things are fine,
I'm just saying, but it has more utilities.
so then we're gonna keep
Oh.
inspecting it. So like one of the definitions that you're talking about on page 3112E, the building is not receiving public utilities. So in that case, you could have a permit that's required. And then you start going through, like, what are the things that are going to happen? So you skip the exemption section. You're gonna pass a resolution that there's an initial fee due at the time that you register the building. Then there's a renewal fee once a year that will be due. If the building is vacant, if the vacant building is occupied or otherwise brought into lawful use within 3 months, 80% of the fees. So then we talk about paying you the fees back. It's valid for a year. So your consent to entry. An applicant for a permit shall consent to the entry of the city administrator or my designee. So obviously I'm gonna go in there with like the building inspector, like I can't define what these things are. At reasonable hours upon reasonable notice, refusal to of there, and then it would be a municipal infraction and you'd start to go down that path. Consent to an emergency inspection. An applicant also consents that we can come in there if we believe there's an emergency existing with respect to the building or structure. So if someone came and said, a huge chunk of brick just fell onto the sidewalk and we have concerns about the integrity, or look at what happened in Davenport. Like, these are real things. That obviously wasn't a vacant building, but it's still like the concern of that you have to let us in there. Cooperation by the owner. All owners holding a permit shall cooperate with and facilitate inspections, and then continued compliance. For the permit to remain valid, the building or structure shall continuously comply with the filed vacant building plan and maintenance requirements of this chapter. Failure will be a violation of the code. And then they kind of define like the inspections. If a vacant building permit is denied, let's see. So basically, you issue a vacant building permit when you've deemed that there's no public nuisance. So if you look at like page 36, like the top half, it says, upon a finding by the city administrator that the vacant building is secure, it's not hazardous, and does not present a public nuisance, I'll issue the permit. And then if you're in the process of being inspected, and again, like, this is not going to be me, this is going to be the building inspector based on codes or our attorney based on the nuisance violations. You're going to have a list of the maintenance plan, and it's going to have a reasonable amount of time, but not forever, to be able to get those things addressed. So for example, when you have a gaping hole where rodents can get into your building, where the roof line meets the wall, and birds can get in there, and then rodents can get in there. And we're gonna say, like, that has to be secured. Or when the weather material around the windows also is not adequate, we're gonna have like those things on the list.
I guess my concern is a building that is structurally fine, has good roof, nothing's falling off it, but it has no heat, air conditioning, plumbing, electricity to the building right now. Where does this fall into play? I mean, how does that building,
Well, don't you have to maintain utilities? Yeah. That was one of the things. You have to
One of the
maintain
requirements is-
utilities.
so you have to hook them up,
Yeah.
Yep.
but beyond that?
Well, if everything else was good and it was just utilities, yeah, then you'd have to pay the minimums.
I mean,
I guess I'm,
one building that I know might fall in this, I said last winter, when somebody came in, I said, what if window falls out? And that was our whole push on this. And I got laughed at, ha ha ha, windows won't fall out.
Christmas
10 days
Eve.
later,
Window
window
fell
falls
out.
out, shatters all over the street.
And it was Christmas Eve, because I got the call to
I-
call the property owner. I don't remember, I think you and then the person that owned across the street, like, it is valid that things like that are what you'd be inspecting.
Yeah.
You know, that there was like lattice work that was loose and then
I
a window.
understand that, but how does this move a building that probably needs $75,000, $100,000 worth of improvements just to be able to lease it out?
It's gonna help push that we don't have deteriorated buildings downtown.
Because he's gonna have to pay a fee to be on the,
So he's gonna have to let us inspect, and then, and you know there's buildings right now that are problematic downtown. Not a ton of them, but a few. And so this is the opportunity to get in there, and other than just the nuisance ordinance, to be able to say, because you have a vacant building, here are the things that you have to get up to snuff to be able to have a permit, or you're in violation. So it is being very aggressive, but many communities are doing it on your vacant buildings downtown.
But if a building is vacant, it is structurally sound, it has utilities,
We're gonna leave you alone.
we're gonna leave them alone. They just have to pay the fee to be on the list. Period. They do not have to sell it. They don't have to do
You can
anything
sit
with
with a
it.
vacant building all you
They
want.
just have to pay the fee every year.
Correct.
Yes.
And I honestly, like, before we get to that, like, if this passes, then we would need to do a resolution for the fees, and I'll have to reach out to other cities, because I really don't know, is this like a $50 permit, $100 permit?
It needs to cover the building inspector fees, for sure, because I don't think the city should have to pay for that.
Nope.
So that's
you're
one
getting
question.
inspected every year, aren't you?
And they have to pay the fee every year.
Well, I think, though, that once you get up to snuff, yeah, like, the intent would be that, like, if you got all that stuff done, then you're gonna walk through and it'll be fast. So it's $100 for him to come. I mean, we pay ECIA $100 an hour for travel time and coming here. But obviously, like, we could try to condense some of those so that we're not literally paying half an hour in each direction from the west end of Dubuque or whatever, but $100. But again,
Oh, I think it should be a $500 minimum to be on this list.
right. And the point, again, is to clean up the buildings.
Yes.
Like, it feels different than probably what we've done in the past, but a lot of cities are doing it because remember when the business people were here, and remember when the downtown assessment staff was here from the state, was that you have a right to your building until it affects my property. And especially in the downtown area, like, they're all connected. And so it definitely is going on offense when it comes to dilapidated buildings. Like, we're not just waiting for a problem that we can see from the outside. We're saying we want to take ownership. And basically, I think the way that the downtown assessment people talked about it was, if you just sit back and wait, it's like you're sort of allowing your downtown to go away. And we've clearly been making huge strides towards improving a lot of the buildings, and we need the rest to come along. And like Megan said, like, if you want to hold a building that's fixed up and tight, and you just want it to sit vacant for the sake that it's vacant, like, you can do that, but it's going to comply with code stuff. So when you look at that whole code list, that's kind of pages 36. So building openings, airways, windows, doors are secure and no birds, no vermins, no trespassers. Waste removal, there's no junk all around. The roof and the flashings are sound and tight. Drainage system is functional and installed. Structure is maintained in good repair and structurally sound. The structural members are free of deterioration. Foundation walls, exterior walls, decorative features, overhang extensions, chimneys, walkways, building accessories, stretchers, garages, sheds, fences are free of any hazards and in good repair. And then the last one is exterior premise, so that you can't just have junk everywhere.
And I don't know if it's in this ordinance or if it's gonna be when we do the resolutions later, but like, it's per building, not per owner, correct?
It's
Like,
per building. If
the
you own
fees will
3,
be
yes,
per building.
yes, per property, as a parcel.
One of the questions that I have, if there is one single occupant, like say the building has multiple apartments, multiple like spots for commercial space, but it has one single occupant, does that exempt them?
Well, it's more in that definition, so you have to have like regular hours to the public.
For commercial, but for.
Well, like the reason I'm asking is like, I'm gonna use us, like the city of Cascade as an example. Our shed next door, like that,
The garage that we're
the
taking down.
garage that we're taking down, like technically, like if we didn't take that down, like that's not airtight, that's not, so.
So we're setting the example by doing that.
Yep.
But like my question is, okay, so what happens if some of these buildings have pieces of the building that are like that aren't open to the public? But like you can tell, like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Then we're probably gonna have to tackle it with just the nuisance side of it. Like you're saying, if we were a business, but we had a garage that we ignore.
Or like even like the back half of the building isn't being used. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because like some of the buildings are massive. Like, you know what I mean? Like plenty of space to have multiple.
Well, but
Like-
well, okay, I was thinking like Bill's building, but it'd be per address, because you have a different address than the front does, don't you?
What's that?
You have an address off of the side street,
Pierce
not
Street.
off Pierce Street, yeah.
It's upstairs, some of them have back side entrances. So like they
Can
could
ask.
have 100 square foot retail space on the front, and technically that would,
Yeah, but then I think that you would still argue that 90% of that building is not open to the public. So when I go into the 100 square feet in the front, can I go peruse through the rest of it? And if I can't, then that part's vacant.
I want to make sure we're not discouraging people from fixing it. Like, you know, like Bill said, one of these buildings is going to take almost $1 million to fix it up. I don't have $1 million sitting around to help me fix up a building. So if I could put $100,000 towards a section of it, I can do it in sections. I want to make sure that we're encouraging that too. I mean, yes, we need to get these buildings done, but like, we are not all Brian Bach that can come in and gut an entire building. That's great that he can, but like, I want to work with these owners too.
To do it.
It's all gonna be about progress. It's not
Okay.
gonna be like, you have $1 million worth of stuff and you can spend the first $100 in 3 years.
Okay.
If you're making progress, so that you're showing like, I can afford so much a year, and it's not like, it's no different than we have like someone who needs a utility payment plan. Like, you don't get to say, I'll pay 10 cents on a $500 bill for the next 100 months, and then I'll get caught up.
Because there's a thought process that goes involved in it. So like, let's just say we have a building, right? And I bought this building, and I want to, meet all the codes, and I want to show that I'm trying to improve this to make it a retail space or apartments or whatever it may be. So I'm gonna take my money, whatever I take it, and I'm gonna invest it into this building. So I don't want any progress and money that I put into this building to go away by like, something being open in the back or water leaking down all over the place.
Yeah.
So some of the first things I'm gonna go after is, make sure the plumbing works, make sure I'm not leaking, making sure what I invest in the front part of the
Is
building isn't gonna be
protected.
destroyed and protected. Yeah, so there's little bits that are gonna go, but they create a motion for the whole building eventually. I
Because-
might not get to remodel the upstairs apartments until later. I might just be able to get this and get everything kind of sealed up and good. And
But
then I
the
get this
building's
part
stable.
going. Yeah, and the building's stable. And then, 10 years down the road, I get to do an apartment, or I get to do, but you're showing that progress to bring that building forward.
And in a certain order that helps you comply with this code.
Right.
Yes.
Which only makes sense to your point, that if you're investing in the middle, of the stuff that maybe seems more fun, you wouldn't do that if everybody can like fly into here.
Right, and
the little
destroy,
rats can
and
come
then
in.
you lose
Right,
all your money.
and your raccoons
you
are
know?
eating the new stuff that you just put in.
Right, right. So it's kind of that, it's gonna.
Logical.
Yeah, it's a logical progression that would
Well, and
happen.
it makes sense to start with even the commercial side of things, so that you can then start generating some revenue to help you then finish the upper parts.
Correct.
Okay, good.
And this isn't just downtown, correct? It's covers
is
all
all
commercial
commercial
real
and
estate
industrial.
citywide.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not residential right now. There are communities that do this for residential. And again, like it can be somebody that lives next to a house that's been kind of abandoned, and they feel the same way, that there's like hoodlummy creatures and people that are living next door to them, or the property next door, and things are happening, or it's, you know, different things. And so I think this is enough for us to tackle. If we got to a successful place and a comfort level, you could someday add residential, but we're not putting that in here right now.
I mean, because there's a couple different properties on Main Street that even getting utilities up
Would help.
to snuff would be a undertaking a little bit.
That's a big item.
And they have to come back, like, again, this is saying, like, you have to come back with a plan, and then we have to deem it reasonable. Like I said, like, you can't just say, I'm gonna take 10 years to fill my holes. But it is kind of forcing people's hands to not just buy, you know, and I have one that I'm dealing with, and he's like, I have 40 other properties, like, I don't care. But like, we care, that we want you to care about the one that you have here in Cascade, and the other ones are not in Cascade, so he's not here. He doesn't care. Like, said that right out. So this is kind of creating a,
We're gonna force them to care.
yes. Or it's really okay also to sell it, you know, because there are people a lot of times where they just hold on to it because they can, and no one's kind of forcing the issue, and then if they're really not interested in it, then they may be more of an eager
And
seller.
we're kind of building in a protection, not only for keeping the things, but like, let's just say, for instance, that several buildings went up for sale, did go up for sale, or somebody did go through, and an outside interest buys up some of those buildings. And they really don't care about our downtown and don't really want our downtown to be successful and really would like it to be a parking lot. You know, it really kind of protects us in that notion that you're gonna own this, you're gonna have to pay the upkeep. So now they're gonna have an investment into the building at one way or another. So I think it protects the neighbors, it protects the city, it kind of, it's good for our community.
So Lisa, you just need an approval of,
First reading, and I would suggest with the amendments that came out of Bill's question.
Okay.
Need a motion?
That was my like one question. So the lawyers are 100% behind this. They.
Yep, they wrote it. This is
Yeah.
all about, like, if we have to go down a path where people ignore us, like, this is what you need to eventually, like, that's not the goal. The goal is compliance, but you also need to have a path that, like, there has to be teeth, so that if you get to it, you'd have an infraction. And eventually, if you absolutely ignore us, the city can take over your property. That's not the goal, but the law does provide that. Because you have to have teeth if you just completely ignore us.
Do you think this gives us enough teeth, Bill? Does that
Oh.
answer your question?
Bill, you're saying for the loophole?
Yeah, for Bill. Well,
He's
Bill,
looking.
and just wondering if we had enough to,
I'd have to read through the whole thing. Right now, all I've got is the changes over. I mean,
Again, you have another month, because this would only be the first reading. Bless you.
excuse me.
So there'd be 2 weeks, and then in 4 weeks, we'd do the other readings.
I think that's a solid plan. I mean, it gives everybody time to read over it. We pass this tonight, and then everybody just keeps looking at it and come up with more things for by the time the second reading comes around, you know, if you
Let
see
me know.
anything, or, and we kind of keep putting it forward, keep it a work in progress over the next few weeks, just to make sure everybody spends a little time on it.
Any other concerns? If none, I need a motion.
I'll make a motion with the amendment.
Amendment. Motion by Delaney,
I'll second it.
second by Oliphant. Roll call?
Roush.
Aye.
Hush.
Aye.
Delaney.
Aye.
Oliphant.
Aye.
Kelchner.
Number 10, consideration on resolution number 59-23, approval of Dubuque County Secondary Roads Agreement, RCTP funding for 2nd Avenue Northeast in the amount of $25,000.
You'll recall that council gave permission to submit the application to the Dubuque County Secondary Roads RCTP program We were in the high scores for the other communities. I think there were 8 communities that applied, and 3 of them got funding. 2 of us got 25,000, and so we were at the top end of the funding. So that will go towards Second Avenue, which we would do this fall. So number 1, you would be approving the resolution that gives approval for the mayor and Kathy to sign the contract with the county. And then the second item would be just making sure that we have permission to proceed with getting it all ready to get prices.
Any questions? If none, I need a motion on resolution number 59-23.
I'll make a motion on resolution 59-23.
Motion by Oliphant.
I'll second.
Second by Roush. Roll call.
Hush.
Aye.
Delaney.
Aye.
Oliphant.
Aye.
Kelchen.
Aye.
Roush.
Aye.
Number 11, discussion to proceed to finalize plans and quotes for Second Avenue Northeast project.
So anybody have any concerns? Otherwise, you know, there was an element of stormwater improvement, so I'm just going to work with Phil and then we'll get quotes and come back to the council.
The only thing that I'd like put in there, that if they do any milling, that the city retains ownership of those for projects that we have for either alleys or anything else, so we can make use of that material.
That's fine.
The other thing I was just thinking about is, I'm assuming when you say fall, this will be after the pool is closed. and
Correct, that was the
baseball's done.
plan.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that's,
Yep. Based on the timing of when we knew we'd find out it, we basically thought, like, we'll get it ready so you can approve it in August, and then they can do it as a September, October project. So yes, when the pool closes. When the sad day comes, when the pool closes.
Number 12, consideration of ordinance number 09-23, street naming, and this is the first of 3 readings.
So again, remember, we talked about when we had the naming for the Parkview Street, that there was direction in there that was opposite of what we actually do. And then we just kind of said that maybe we just need to get rid of that altogether. We know kind of how we're going to name things when it happens. And this is only when you have a non-platted subdivision, so pretty infrequent that that would happen. So this would be the first reading, and it just deletes that portion of the code.
And you just do it on a case-by-case basis?
Correct.
If no concerns, I need a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Delaney,
I'll second.
second by Roush. Roll call.
Delaney.
Aye.
Oliphant.
Aye.
Kelchen.
Aye.
Roush.
Aye.
Hush.
Aye.
Number 13, discussion on installation of speed feedback equipment on Highway 136.
So I got an email a couple weeks from the state DOT and said that our Highway 136 was eligible for what they call speed feedback signs, and they're solar, but they get hooked up to where you have a small power source, and then it just flashes what your speed is to try and give people an indication that you're going too fast. So Highway 136 was eligible. They only had so many. They said these go really fast, so I just responded and said we'd take it, and just want to make sure that before they would actually bring it, that no one has concern. So this is not recorded when it comes to like speed tickets. Nobody's issuing tickets from that. It isn't like the communities that have cameras. It's not recording that. It's just flashing that up. So,
Get your attention.
correct.
Just wanted to mention, several years ago, we actually had a businessman that approached us and looked at a couple sites for us, and once we found out what the price was, decided he couldn't afford them. So I think this is probably a pretty good deal.
They're pricey.
Yeah, they were very pricey. A
We
lot
do
of
have to
communities-
manage them after, but the initial, like,
Yeah.
You see them in a lot of communities, so
it slows you down.
Yeah.
it does, it basically gets your attention. Hey, I'm going this fast.
The other thing I was gonna ask, like, they have to be on 136? Like,
Yes.
okay. Because like, just
Because the
thinking.
DOT is only going to put them on their highways.
That makes sense.
Dubuque County and Jones County also have speed trailers, and we've used Jones County several times. down
Those are
in
just the
South
temporary
Bend.
ones, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, they're actually on a cart. They'll pull them here and chain them up. and,
Plug them in.
They'll do some data resource information for us. and they'll
Just
do that.
thinking when school starts again, it might be worth putting a couple in front of the elementary school, just as another reminder.
We could maybe borrow one, 'cause, yeah, they are pricey.
Yeah, like not buy one, like see if we can borrow the
Like
trailers.
just for, to start the school year.
See if we can get it.
Just as another reminder, like,
Slow down.
yeah.
Get your attention. Okay.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you, Fred.
Thanks, Fred.
It would be nice for us because it just happens that the high school is literally right
Yeah.
as you're coming in town there, so I mean, it's.
Do they pick locations?
We had to pick it based on like power sources and closest proximity, so I don't have the application, but I can email it out to you guys where we said, but we had to pick like pretty much, I feel like it was kind of by Acura and then down by the park. So,
So they're
not right by the
They're
school.
not solar?
There is a solar pellet, it's hard to see on this picture, but yeah.
Yeah, it's solar.
It's got a little
Has
solar
the
thing.
You still have to
Backup
hardwire them?
Power, yeah.
Yeah, like there was still, like based on the place that we picked. So, and this is only for little towns that they do it. Like you have to be under 10,000. And it can be one is approved for each state highway approach to a community. So if we had like two state highways still, like if 151 was still the old 151, then we could have two.
Yep.
And we had to submit so you have to have, they'll assemble the foundation, the pole, the sign, a speed limit sign that goes with it. So we had to tell them like, what's the speed limit in our spots that we picked. No local funding required. We do have to take ownership of the signs afterwards. And there's a 5-year warranty that's transferred to the city when they install it.
Yeah, but that's a huge chunk that we don't have to pay for, so
Yeah.
that's worth it.
Yep.
And they allocate $750,000 a year for this program. So that was where they said like, snap, snap.
Yep.
You're not gonna get one. So I figured, highly unlikely you'd say no, but I think if we had waited till today, we probably would not be getting it, so. Everybody's good with that?
Yep.
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you for finding
Thanks
that.
for doing it.
Yeah,
Thank you. Number 14, discussion on city parking lot improvements at time of Highway 136 reconstruction.
So this is really just initial, make sure that you think this is at least something we want to look at. We're not asking you to approve any kind of dollars because we really don't know what the dollars would be. But when we've had people come and look at it, city staff, Jake, people like that, we're probably estimating in the high, just under 100,000 or close to $100,000. But if you look at that, people talk about it all the time. We obviously wouldn't want to do it before that project because there'll likely be some staging of equipment for our
Down
highway
there.
project at that lot, at that site. I know the mayor also brought it up that he thought there would be millings on Highway 136 and that those millings could go to the parking lot, but there are no millings on this project. It's-
Can we specify that they do? That they do mill it?
No,
We can't?
I don't think so. I mean, they're gonna be here this week, so I can ask, but I don't, that's completely changing the entire project.
Because if you do an asphalt overlay on that parking lot, it's gonna be somewhat of a waste because it's so wet.
Well, we're not saying like we have to have it looked at, which is where I don't want to invest any money unless you think like this is something that you value doing, is there's going to have to be some sub-base improvements because it is pretty swampy.
That's where if there was millings, that would change that.
Yeah.
Well, we
But
also
as you
need to
know,
look at the
Jake-
proximity of where that is, and we've done concrete comps on it, and concretes came back economical in our area.
Yeah, it's not even that much different like it used to be. Concrete
No.
used to be so much more, but now they're
It's really not.
concrete and asphalt. It does not have such a big gap anymore. I just don't want to invest any time of like Jake's if you're not like, hey, we should at least consider this. So what we're really investing now is like, do I want Jake to work on it more? When the DOT is here this week, I want to be able to say like, what are your views on us doing this at the same time? Kind of more after, but yeah. I don't think I can ask, but I don't think they'll switch it to a millings project.
So we can't specify that they mill 136?
I'm saying that that's not what's been going on
Oh.
for the years before
Yeah.
my time, and I don't think 2 months before they gotta approve everything that they're gonna say. I mean, I don't know why they didn't pick milling versus what they're doing, but
If this is in the planning stage, I was curious, went down and measured, the parking lot's about 75 feet wide,
it's a big lot.
but the parking lot that we put in, that's 65 feet wide for 2 cars parked, whatever. And so, I don't know why there's an extra 10 feet more than,
What would be normal?
Oh, are you saying the east to west length?
that's correct.
Yeah, it's kind of too, see, and that's what we talked about too, is like, could you get more parking there? But it's not wide enough to create a whole nother row.
No, but I'm saying.
But it's
that's-
like too wide, you don't need that much.
mean, there's probably a 12% or
Are you saying
10
that we
feet
can
of-
make it more narrow?
Perhaps,
And that
okay,
might cut down
I see what
costs.
you're saying.
yeah,
Okay, so you're saying make it smaller?
yeah, probably.
From
the-
east to west.
Probably on the east side,
Right.
because that's kind of.
Okay, I didn't know that that's what you were
Could be grasped very
saying.
easily, but. it
Fair
was-
enough.
On the east side, you could actually narrow up the parking lot and then do gravel off the edge.
Well, but I mean,
You just put grass there then and not have
Or
parking.
grass,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, but it just
Yeah, that's
seems
a good point.
abnormally wide.
I thought so too, because I said, is it wide enough that we could get like 3 rows instead of 2? And like, it's not wide enough for that. But you're right, maybe we can shore it up and then not have to spend as much.
I measured the ones, our most recent lot there,
Yeah, that makes sense.
and 65, and this is 75, so.
Good
something
idea.
to think about.
So is everybody at least supportive of let's have a valuable conversation and then
Take a look.
Yep.
it's important enough when we're doing that? Okay, that's all I needed for today, thank you.
Number 15, discussion on change in housing units for 201 2nd Avenue Southwest and street bump outs on Buchanan Street.
So as I explained in the memo, Brian called me, had already spoken to the state who approved it, but we have to give our blessing. So the current project, when it was submitted for the grant, was 10 units of all single 1-bedroom apartments, all on the 2nd and 3rd floor. Now that they've kind of gotten in the building and found all these kind of cool things that are in different areas, and there are windows in the basement that have been covered up, and that could be egress windows. And so obviously you have to have egress windows in the basement to make them legal. So he called the state and said that he would like to do 8 units on the 2nd and 3rd floor, and then be able to change. So obviously you're eliminating 2, going from 10 to 8, and then of those 8, 2 of them would be 2 bedrooms, which that is a big deal. Like when you look at like single parents who have kids, people wanting to be able to not just have a single 1-bedroom apartment. And in our housing study that ECIA had helped with back then, that was one of the needs that we had, was not just single unit apartments. So that would be an asset, which the state was very supportive of, is having more beds. But to then do the math, the basement has to have 2 of the units, and he would do studio apartments, 1 justified to the north of the basement and 1 to the south. So on the south side, the egress windows can go to the south towards the alley, but there's no way for the north, like it wouldn't go all the way to the north end, which would be a right-of-way as well, since it's on the corner. So they're investigating where those spots are, and I kind of went over there, but I wasn't able to meet with his staff, and he was going on vacation, so, but you can see where one of them are. There's like a piece of metal, and I have those in some of the pictures. But we would have to be flexible if we said yes. You can see like right there, if I lifted up that piece of metal right there, that was like one of the holes that would go like straight down to the basement. So it has to come out enough that you would have your egress hole there. He thought he'd have like a cute kind of like iron railing around it. And then of course, there's not gonna be enough space for the sidewalk to stay straight. So if you've been to other downtown areas, people do bump outs, which then kind of just hopefully fit in the right spot where you can still have like a parking spot with a bump out, and then somebody has to like back out to get around the bump out. And then the bump out would allow kind of a curve in the sidewalk. So in order for them to do that, we would, number 1, have to give our blessing to the change in the way the apartments are structured. And then number 2 is the only way to get those egress windows to fit in there would be to allow a bump out type concept for the sidewalk. I think it's, minus there being a bump out there, I think it's positive. And I don't think a bump out's a terrible thing. Like I said, if you go to other downtown areas, you can see where there's bump outs that have trees, for example. A lot of downtowns have that, so.
And to get, it just narrows a little bit and goes back wide again.
And I know they're gonna mention something about snow, but it's not a big deal either snow-wise, because the payloader's gonna be right there cleaning that parking lot, so he can pull that out or scoop around
Yeah.
with the box and take it away. It's not like it's
And there would be 2 of them.
out of our way.
How far do they come out from the curb line?
Well, that's where, like, I just have to give the blessing, and then obviously we'd report back kind of with
To make it
making sure
work.
that you're allowed, and then we'd see with the building inspector, he'd come out, tell him, okay, this is how wide your space has to be. And then there'd be a ladder from where the floor of the window egress well
From
is.
the well, yeah.
Up to get above the railing. Because I was like, will there be like a little gate in the railing? And he's like, no, it'd just be a ladder that would extend up if there was a fire.
I think this is fine. I don't have any issues with it.
That's a good way to add more capacity to our housing.
Yeah.
2 more beds.
And we're utilizing the basement where he ultimately probably wasn't before that.
That was
So
kinda
it
dead space.
Gonna just be dead space that,
So everybody okay with that? We don't need to have a vote right now, but I'll just tell them that we're in agreement and get more details so we can kind of understand the architectural landscaping side of the bump outs. That's all, thank you.
Number 16, discussion on public parking lot west of 201 Second Avenue Southwest costs.
So when we did our urban renewal amendment, we had the parcel that we just talked about with the apartments, and then we also put the parcels into the west with the intention that we designated that as a hopeful future parking lot, public parking lot. So they have an agreement to purchase it for $175. And when we negotiated all of this back in the fall, it was that the intent would be a public parking lot. So when I did the square footage, which is hard to see on these maps, but the northern part, that's like a natural break for the barn that he would retain, it's like a 70-30 split. And so we would own 70% to the north, and he would retain ownership, Brian, that is, of the 30% to the south. So when you split that 175, it would be $122,000. When we do our urban renewal amendment that we'll have to do again, then we'd actually put those dollars in there. So the parcel was in there, but we didn't do, I think we'd have to do another part of that, which we're doing anyway, the urban renewal agreement.
So he's gonna keep the section to the south.
The south portion.
For the parking of,
No, he's gonna keep the barn, because remember, you didn't require him to provide parking.
okay,
And we have an ordinance that says you don't have to provide parking downtown.
okay.
And so.
I was just clarifying that.
Right, no. So he's gonna keep the barn and turn it into some kind of cool venue. You know, there's that green barn there.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Right
So
at
the
the
barn's
alley.
not coming down. And as a part of this 175, it's a cleared lot. So we do not have demo costs.
Okay.
So that was where he had a higher price, and when Brian negotiated, it was bring the price down and you take the buildings down. So that by the time we own it, it's a cleared lot. It's not paved, so we'll have to look at that. But we would put both of those things then into purchase of it and then eventual paving.
Who incurs the costs of filling and compaction? Will that be,
I'd have to, he's on vacation, but I'm assuming when he said that he has to clear it, that there will be some sort of, kind of like we are with the
houses?
library.
Mhm.
There has to be some analysis of like how you have to compact it for a parking lot, obviously different than like the library had to be compacted, which that was part of Mark demoing the site.
Mhm.
Yay, more parking.
So I think this creates like less pressure. And obviously we have the library, which is expanding their lot, but I feel like that's gonna have, then it's not like we're trying to put these apartment people in that same lot, because I just don't think it's enough. So for now, it would be, we would proceed to do the urban renewal amendment, which I think we had talked about with Dorsey and Whitney starting in August. But I want to make sure that the council feels comfortable with this so that Brian can proceed with his agreement with the owner. Any concerns? Again, TIF related.
I'm comfortable with it.
Same.
Again, we had talked about it, just not numbers. Okay, that's all I have, Mayor, for that.
Number 17, discussion on current resolution 8114, water and sewer forgiveness policy changes.
So I wanted to give you this because I feel like this is the place where we would add the lawn forgiveness, where if we want to encourage people to be watering their lawns and not have to pay the sewer side of it, that we would add that to that. So then because this already existed, I felt like we should talk about it. So one of the things that hasn't been enforced according to this is you can see here that the only time we forgive sewer is when it actually didn't go down the sewer, and that's not what's happening. They're forgiving the sewer. Like if you have a leaky toilet, for example. So if you have a leaky toilet, this would say you get 50% forgiveness on your water bill, up to $300 one time, but because it went down the sewer, you wouldn't get a sewer one. And so we don't have to, I know the meeting's gonna get late here, I want you to think about this, and then if you don't wanna give me feedback tonight, we can talk about it at the next meeting, but looking at this again, this came back from like 2014, which some of you weren't on the council back then, but I think that we need to, we want to keep, and then the other thing that I want you to think about is, do you want to give a 1 month forgiveness on sewer for watering? Or do you want to do a 2-month?
Usually, depending on the weather, one isn't much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I would lean more towards 2.
Like
Think
just looking
60
at the one
days?
that's been growing, that Aquin one, it's been 2 months of,
Yeah, in the wrong
Watering.
conditions, 1 month
1 month isn't.
isn't much.
And I mean, even if you look at our park down there, we watered that and that was sod. Watered that for
More
the
than
first
a month.
and we're still watering.
Right. And I think, like I said, if the person had already lived there, like, I'll write it if you're good with this. Like, we would write it that if there's no history with the house of people living there, they're gonna have to pay the bill and then get a credit after like a 6-month review of when they're done watering. And we know, like, are you a 2,000, 4,000, or 6,000 gallon monthly family?
Once they've established.
Like, we have an example of somebody that's watering right now that moved in like late last year, so they left it over the winter. And so they would have had history by the time. So we can say, like, if there's, and we have to kind of define, like, what are we saying for new construction? Because there are people that come in and say, like, I think my grass looks like crap and I want to redo it. Like, that's not really our
Well,
intention.
like,
at
what
all.
if somebody comes in and adds a big addition to their house? Well, a lot of ground gets torn up that way too.
Right. But then you'd hope that it's just like a, I don't know. That's what I say, like, think about how we want to define what gets you into that. Is it like truly like you've had a building permit in the last year for a new, completely new structure? Or something that's not just like a little room addition? Like, we have an $80,000 garage going up right now, so that's at least the value on the building permit. So we don't have to decide tonight, but I think probably likely is 60 days is probably better. And then we'll define, and I do think we should have them pay, because I know when I talked to the staff about it, they were concerned, like, if it's a new house, like, what's your basis for the deduct? Because they shouldn't get deducted for what they really did use and go down the sewer for showers and stuff like that. But if we don't know what that is, then we'll just wait, make them pay.
I like the way
Yeah.
that regulated
Right.
the figure.
And we'll list it that if for some reason you moved in October and didn't plant your grass, and we have 6 months, then you could get your credit right away. Or the other thing that we talked about, somebody asked me, like, say with Bucky's condos, if he's planting the grass before anybody lives there, then I would say he'd get, if we can confirm that no one lives there, then he can get his credit right away, because maybe minus like 1,000 gallons or something for just minor water. But if no one's living there, then we do know that the whole credit
The
would
whole
be for
amount.
the grass.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think we kind of have to be flexible.
Something else too, like, again, this is gonna take time up to be able
Look
to
at
do
it.
these calculations and do the credits. Do we charge like a $25 fee to pay for staff time?
Right. So you get a credit minus an admin fee of X. Yeah, that's fine.
Yep.
Because it does take time and it's to the benefit. And I mean, someone came in here 2 weeks ago with a $900 utility bill because they were watering their grass.
But like, there are literally
It's a
people
lot of money.
in our neighborhood that water all the time.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Mhm. Okay, so let's think about that and put it on for next time.
Did we just incorporate number 18 also?
Is that the trees?
No, that's on the.
Oh, yeah,
lawn
that's the
watering.
same too. 17 and 18 we just talked about.
Gotcha. Number 19, discussion on adding the requirement of a tracer wire box bracket for plastic water service lines.
Sorry, I was going to bring it in here. It's in my office if you want to look at the real thing. But on the left side of this picture is what a curb stop looks like. Because we've been pushing for GIS, I don't know if any of you have noticed, but, or any of you neighbors have ever said anything, but when we have to dig down to find the curb box, there are literally curb boxes that are buried in the ground by like 2 feet. And so when you have to shut the water off, like if there was ever a like
Break.
major break in your house and it's the middle of winter and we have to dig down 2 feet. So this is a little bit different than just this, but the ordinance does require for curb boxes to be at the level of the ground, that they are accessible. So that's one thing that when we find these, we may have to say to people, like, you need to get it raised up so that we can get at it. So that's one thing. Unrelated to this, but it's connected, is that when you have this curb stop, and then we allow people to have plastic pipe, which we allowed earlier this year. Remember, we have the tracer wire, and then the blue side of it on the right is what we called and required the tracer box. But then, because they're both now in the ground, and they both have the chance to be, to lower and raise, they usually don't raise that much, but lower, this bracket, which is literally like a $70 piece, allows it to keep those two clamped together. They are not common at J&R where people get their supplies. And so my proposal, if you're willing to put this in the ordinance, is that the guys would just get, say, like 10 in stock, and then as that depletes, and then they can just buy them from us. So even just this tracer wire box and the bracket, it was like under $200 for both. So these are not major investments on the part of the builders or the homeowners.
And on that note, the guys came into my yard looking for mine one day. I've been there 17 years, had no idea where it was at.
And how far did they dig?
Well, you know where, most everybody know where I live, where my flagpole is. It's about 1.5 feet away from my flagpole in the middle of the yard.
It's that far in?
It's that far in. And we didn't know it was there, so we probably had a foot of mulch over top of it.
Oh.
So, yeah, so I think this is probably a good idea too. Yeah, I was Marty was all over my yard and kept moving around, and finally walked up the flagpole. I'm like, yeah, there's no way it's in there. That's where it was at. Sure enough.
See, exactly.
So they're not putting the same.
Not to sound really dumb, but this is like the water thing?
So the left side is if we have to come and shut your water off normally because you don't pay your bill, or if you have a leak in your basement and you're doing work inside your house and you need your water shut off, there's a tool, you can look at it in my office, but you put that on there and then you turn off the water. So this is the valve that's called the curb box.
Under
So
valve.
mine is
Curb
like in my driveway.
Yes, mine is too.
They
Okay.
just take the cap off and put the rod down and turn it. It's
Right.
all underground.
So the problem is when they're in yards, and like literally, I think it was like over by your grandpa somewhere. They were by Grandpa Kelchin's house, like digging up like 2 feet down. And then you have to think about, so the clamp that goes on it to turn it is like taking a wrench like this. So just to find it, they're creating a little hole. But if they have to go down 2 feet to actually turn the water off, the hole is like this, so that down there, they can still crank it like in a circle. Because it's not like on an extension that you can crank it up at the ground level. So this is to help prevent that, but we're also like probably gonna have some people that are gonna have to invest a little money when we find these. The ordinance already says they have to be at ground level, and we haven't really done anything about it, but we need to say, it's for your own safety, because if water's filling up your basement, even though people think like, oh, it's really just to shut it off if you don't pay in the winter, that's what we can turn off, not electricity, obviously, but we wanna be able to enforce that, and then if everybody's okay, I would bring back an ordinance that just adds, and this bracket.
Have your basement fill up with water once, you'll change your mind.
Yep.
Exactly.
You'll make it visible.
Anybody opposed to adding that to the ordinance?
And this is only if they use the plastic water lines, or?
The bracket is only if you use plastic, yeah.
For the
Because this
tracer
tracer
wire.
wire box, the right side, the blue, like,
Oh.
you don't have anything like that if it's a copper pipe.
Gotcha.
Because then remember that the plastic means you can't locate it underground, and then when they use their little voodoo stick that they, when you call in 911 calls. So that's all I have for that. I'll bring that ordinance back.
Number 20, discussion on duty to trim trees and dangerous dead and diseased tree ordinance enforcement.
So you have an ordinance on here, again, this is kind of like the one that we just talked about, that people don't really enforce very much. When we walked the corridor for Highway 136 project, there's probably like 4 or 5 very dead trees with like 3 little clumps of green branches, all have emerald ash borer disease, and we don't want to be working around those under the construction. So some are along the highway, some are where we're going to like install 1 block of water, I think on 3rd Avenue by those apartments. So it's obviously not cheap for people to have to remove their trees, but I think that we need to make sure that we're utilizing this ordinance when necessary. It doesn't mean that we're going to randomly go into people's backyards. Some people think like, well, if it's on private property, why is it our business? But it is a safety concern. You know, you do hear of like random trees falling, and then like, is it, you wait till your neighbor complains, because as you know, like even if your neighbor's tree falls on your property, it's your insurance, not theirs. So kind of want to just get input. These are pictures that were right on the corridor of the highway that we would be ordering to come down. Obviously, it also talks about a short timeline, and with this day and age, some of the things that we've heard is that like people may not be able to get a person to come in just a couple weeks to take trees down. But we'd like to be able to say, like if we enforce this as it's listed, that your compliance within a couple weeks is that you've gotten a tree person in, you've gotten a price, and you have a contract signed. And obviously then if it takes you 2 months to get them here, that's not on you. Like you can't force somebody to come in 2 weeks, but we'll work with people on that. We're not going to be unreasonable. But the 2 weeks then can be, you need to get somebody in here with a price.
If, is this something similar to where if a person cannot afford it, that it would go on property tax, that the city could take it down and?
So we could pay for it up front, yes, like if they either refused or said like, I can't, yeah, then we would put it on the tax roll. Kathy would send it in at tax roll time as an assessment. Because we have that on here, doesn't it say? Reasonable, the council shall immediately notify by certified mail, and then if 14 days, if you don't comply, the council can declare it a nuisance and remove it and assess the cost. So yes. However, my point is, we're not gonna be able to be realistic about 2 weeks. So we would say, like, if you have a contract within those
Signed
2
within 2
weeks, and we can, you know, like, we have a right to call the Mike's Tree Service and say, like, is this legit? Like, you're really, this person's hired you and you're gonna come as soon as you can.
Who said?
It's not your new job. Computers and trees. It's
Okay.
got to be a good business right now. But you can see, these are just 4 examples of, like, right on
Yeah.
that little corridor.
They're
And then,
all
like, I
over.
came from, like, my house down Second Avenue, kind of over by your
Yeah.
house, and I saw one, so.
Does it make sense to like compile a whole list, everything together so that maybe they can all go in under one contract to get a cheaper price? Instead
Certainly
of
could
sending
try.
them off to everybody else and having them do all their own?
Well, but I think when somebody comes in, they're gonna see them in town and they're gonna be stuck in, that's their deal right now. They're stuck in towns forever. We make this an ordinance.
I talked to Camiller a
Camiller,
week
yeah.
ago. He did 20 for the city of Monticello. He's got 200 more to do. I don't think he's available.
It's crazy.
They're all that busy. It's ridiculous.
So we'll just have to see. Like, I don't think we can, if you can't get somebody in, like, we're not gonna be able to, I don't know. I mean, maybe Camiller would come in faster for us, but
Yeah.
he did come pretty fast for, like, our 2 projects that we hired him for, but,
That was early in the spring, too.
yeah.
Yep.
That was before anybody.
So that's my thing too, is like, if we get aggressive on it even over the winter, like this fall, I mean, get everybody on the list, and then if they can maybe
Yep.
be more aggressive about it in the spring, even if we give people till the spring. We don't have to enforce the 2-week thing. So everybody okay with that?
Yep.
All right.
Number 21, discussion on park rules ordinance and permission to have kegs of beer.
So as I explained, this came up at a recent public event. I was asked to put that on there. I did speak to the chief about it. He had kind of explained the background of being able to monitor alcohol consumption from a keg versus someone bringing a cooler with a certain number of cans. So as I explained in here, the chief was not in favor of eliminating this, but I at least said that we could discuss it and bring it up before the council. And chief-
My entire department is adamantly opposed to changing it. There are multiple reasons why we don't want to start having keggers. Our events have always been family-oriented. You have a young group of people that bring a keg in, now the alcohol starts flowing freely, and pretty soon we don't know who's drinking from it. The incident the other night, they were asked to remove the keg. I was told by one of the officers at least 2 of the young persons that were there probably should have been charged with public intox because they had consumed so much. One kept actually harassing one of the officers. So we are adamantly opposed to changing this. If somebody brings in a cooler, they want to go get more beer, they've got to leave the park and go get more beer. If they bring in a keg, all they've got to do is walk over with the cup and put more in the cup. So that's our thought on it.
I greatly respect your opinion on this, Fred. However, I do question that because they bring in a cooler with beer and cans of beer in it. Then they have to leave to go get more. Isn't that more dangerous than
Yeah,
them
but most
staying
people don't do that.
there? Okay.
So most people will not do that. They'll bring enough,
And
they'll have a few. and
then that's it.
They're done. We have a lot of people that bring their kids down there at these events, at the dances, hometown days. That park will be full of kids until 8 or 8:30 at night.
Absolutely.
And then all of a sudden you've got, the kids are gone and those parents are gone. Then you've got a few of the people standing around there having a few adult beverages. They're not going back and forth to a keg. They'll go back and forth to the cooler. You know, they may bring 6 or 10 cans with them, maybe a dozen, and that's what they drink all night. If you've got a keg, it's a free-for-all. I said, my entire department talked to Brad, I talked to the part-time officers, we're like, why do we want to start something like that? They're all, like I said, they've always been family-oriented events, we don't want to start having kegers down there.
Somebody did ask me about like when we have events and like licensed bars come down there and they have tapped beer, but I don't think that would count because they're under a
Those are
licensed
not in the
premise.
park, those are parked on the street.
Yeah.
So, and those are licensed events and people have to purchase that.
Right. So somebody just asked if that was how that's allowed, and I said, well, if the Corner Tap Room comes and they've gotten a 5-day license to be on Pierce Street, like that would not fall under it being a violation.
Technically, they're parked on the street, they're not in the park then. So-
Right, but-
And that keg, I mean, you just allow them to come in, if you got a full keg and you walk in there pulling it on a wagon or whatever you're gonna do to bring it in, and you set it up in there and, say, I just show up with it, right? Where normally I might show up with a cooler full of 6 beers, like you said. Now, not only do I have the ability to drink myself way too far, but then I can feed an entire crowd of people, because I'm gonna know people there.
You have a plethora of beer then.
You know what I mean? So it's not just me that's gonna be
Community
affected.
property.
Right, it becomes community property, and then pretty soon, I mean, people bring beer down, everybody
Yeah.
shares anyway, but, I mean, I'm just saying, you have a lot more beer in an area to share, and you get 2 or 3 of them down
Yeah, and pretty soon you've got some 23 to 25-year-olds that have brought it down, and then you've got some of their friends that show up that are maybe 19, 20 years old, and it's kind of hard for us to regulate who is doing what with it. So,
The only two things that I have, A, if we're gonna keep this, we need to make sure there's a sign down at that park.
Yep.
I believe there is one down at.
There's one at the community park, there is not a sign down here.
So I think, A, like, if we're gonna enforce this, we need to make sure there's signage to make people aware. And the second thing is like, do we limit, like, they make coolers now, like Yeti Coolers has like 128 can coolers, like massive, similar amount of alcohol that can be in a keg. Like, do we put limits on that as well?
I've never seen anybody bring one of those big coolers in.
I mean, it's no
Generally,
different than them
yeah.
throwing that on a wagon or whatever and wheeling that into the park.
Because we hadn't seen anybody bring a keg down either on a wagon,
No.
so I mean, that's
Doesn't
why.
mean there won't be a
Yeah.
first.
Right,
Doesn't
that's
mean
what I'm
there
saying,
won't
if
be a
we're gonna
first.
address this,
Yeah.
do we address the rest of it too?
Correct.
And there's also those coolers that have a tapper on them.
Yeah.
That you can fill portions of it with cocktail, like where it's not just beer, it's liquor. Like,
And it doesn't say anything about not having liquor in the park.
And that's the other thing, like, you can
It
fit a
does
lot
talk
of
about
bottles
glass
of,
bottles,
you
but-
can fit a lot of bottles of whatever in
Yeah.
a cooler.
So, yeah, I mean, we've never had an issue with somebody bringing a huge cooler like that. I mean,
Yeah.
again, they'd have to haul it in on a wagon or several people carry it in. So, having that bother.
We could address it as,
If it come, if,
Yeah.
becomes an issue. See if somebody's actually that willing.
Yeah, I would say in the 17 years I've been here, in any of the events, we've had a handful of people that we've offered rides home to. Otherwise, like I said, people bring in a few, they want to dance, they want to listen to music, they want to socialize, and, ones with kids go home early.
I wonder though, like, we're trying to, one of the things we heard time and again from Heart and Soul is like more stuff for the younger population, not just high schoolers, but like the mid-20s that are old enough to drink. And Rockin' on the River, we're trying to get more people to come to these events. Is this a way to get people there? Obviously, safety is our #1 priority. I do totally want that. But I want to find a happy medium where we can do that. And is this a way that we're going to get more people to events if we allow this? But then I don't want it to be a kegger either.
I don't think that allowing kegs in there is going to make that difference. I think people are still going to bring what they're going to drink. Like I said, you bring a keg in, it's an open tap for anybody that wants it. So, the police department is adamantly opposed to it.
I have a question. Why for Rockin' on the River do we allow like carry-ins essentially, whereas like almost everything else down at the park, we typically have like an actual beverage vendor there.
When they have a beverage vendor, then they have a license there, so we have a closed-off area. They can't carry anything in.
I think
the
it's-
Rockin' on the Rivers, there's no licensed beverage person there.
I think, though, the answer is that it's who is organizing it. Like Rockin' on the River has chosen to just let, like, they don't want to sell it, so they just want to let people come in, whereas Hometown Days says we want to get a license, and so you can't.
Yeah.
So I think
If they
it's the
had a
event organizers, just like
Yeah.
at Sunset Street Fest, the chamber said, like, we're going to have vendors, and you can't carry in. So I think
And
it's the
remember
event people.
one of the first Brew and Wing Fest that we had here in town, I think it was, matter of fact, the very first one. 11 o'clock in the morning, guys were in there setting everything up, they were cooking. Our liquor license took effect at noon. Had one of the vendors walk out at 12:01, went to his car, went to walk back in with a six-pack, said, you can't carry that in there, we now have a license. No problem, he took it back to his car. Lady was standing there, pulled a clipboard out of her purse. You guys pass. That would have been our first, probably one and only Brew and Wing Fest. Because if I would have allowed him to take it back in, that would have been it. The license would have gotten pulled. We probably never would have gotten another one. So,
Sting operation at Wingfest. Who knew?
Thank you, Fred.
Thanks, Fred.
So if we are gonna keep it that way, though, I think we do need to get signage down.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
I'll have to, haven't noticed the one.
And it
again.
might, like Fred, I don't know if you have a chance sometime, just swing down to the river, or to the new city park, and just review that, make sure it still makes sense.
Yeah, they actually, I think when they dedicated that park to Slim Boyle, I think they actually redid the sign down there.
They did a new.
So, yeah, and so it's a night, the other one was it's kind of faded, it was getting kind of hard to read. I'll stop by maybe tomorrow, take a picture of it and send it to Lisa, so because it has a list of quite a few things on it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Before the reports, I'd like to thank everybody that donated their time and energy to make the 4th of July festivities so
Yeah, it was a good event.
great. Good job, everybody.
Well, and thanks to Lisa, those pictures that you took are awesome. Like, what a cool
Thanks.
thing to have out on the city, like on the city Facebook page. That's so neat to see all those kids, and that was very cool. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I didn't ride in the parades. Instead, I did that, so it's nice to have those,
Mm-hmm.
just for when you need them, but
Yeah.
thank you. Take a picture of your family.
Great photography skills.
Thanks,
Yes.
thanks. I
Fred,
usually get people saying,
you have
like, oh, do you
anything?
work for the paper?
Your class is coming in handy, Lisa.
Exactly, my phone class.
I actually had somebody ask me if you were a professional photographer too. I was like, I don't think so. But
Of
anyway.
all-
I've taken
of
people's
all the
family
things.
portraits,
Right, exactly.
senior pictures,
Uh,
my other part-time job.
Library Design Committee.
So we will be meeting one more time, and then coming to the council. Remember, at the next meeting, we'll have our public hearing to go out for bids. If anybody's interested in some of the color schemes and what some of the fabrics for the carpet and tile and cabinetry, like there's some samples over there on the table. We had a really productive meeting. If you remember at the last meeting, we talked about that a smaller group of us was going to get together and go kind of through every workspace, which we did, and it was very productive. Just little things like if you have a refrigerator and you don't have a lot of cabinetry, like in the community center room, like putting a small cabinet above the refrigerator. Just stuff that we talked about every place that either people were working or like where you're going to have storage, and it was a good, you know, it wasn't like a
Yep.
life-altering dollar amount change, but a few cabinets here, or where things are positioned, stuff like that. So Michael and Christy were here, and then they will be here at the next meeting to kind of go over everything.
When is our next meeting?
I feel like we have.
It's this Friday.
This Friday.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not going to be there. So this Friday, and then they'll be back at the council meeting. I'll try to get you everything in advance, but then we'll go out for bids and hope for good news. And we are all good with the state, with the CAT grant. Remember, we had to prove to them that we closed the gap on that final 40,000 that we didn't get, since they gave us 460 instead of 500. And I got approval of what we had submitted today, so that's good.
Anything else?
Not for the library. So we sold the yellow truck. All the other stuff that was in the garage that you declared as surplus, I think we made a whopping $160 or some amount, like some stuff just got junked, but the yellow truck was sold for $560. $8, random dollars that people pick. Arlene Iserman's garage was also sold for like 600, and again,
$68.
it was literally like in change, 600 something. And that has to get moved here within the next 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. Jeff Soller got that.
One house down, one to go.
Yes, if you drive past the site, one of the houses came down today, so I took some pictures of that and progress. You can see through, the Iserman house came down first. Bruce's, I think, will be tomorrow. And then remember when we talked about the well damage that was like well 6 and how everything, so I am submitting an insurance claim for that. That claim will definitely be in excess of $5,000, like by the time they come back. And our deductible is $5,000, so we will be filing a claim. I already let them know, and then I got a write-up with Phil and Marty, and I called Northway Well and Pump and talked to the employee there, Tom, today, just to make sure that what I turned in with the initial work is correct and accurate, so we don't obviously file a lot of claims, but we need to file that one. So it should be under like the mechanical and boiler policy where it failed.
Have we heard when they're coming back?
So they intend to come back at the end of summer. They said it's not productive to come like when you have higher usage because they have to take the submersible pump out, so then you don't have a backup well while they're working on it. So while the demand is higher, since then we have 2, if anything would happen with 5 while they have that out, so.
Do they
So they'll
think the
start.
likelihood's good that they'll be able to retrieve that?
They have no idea. They literally haven't, I mean, they have to retrieve it, it's
Yeah.
just how painful it is.
Mm-hmm.
So I learned a lot, like the pump was at 450 feet, the well actually goes down to 1,050 feet. So they take like 10-foot sections and they would like pull each piece up, clamp it, and then you unscrew. There's like a screwing mechanism at every 10 feet. So they only got 60 feet out, so there's 390 feet left to pull out. And when they got to the 60 feet, like, it was done. So somewhere when it broke, there's a 1-inch shaft that goes down into a 6-inch casing. So they're taking out the 6 inches and the 1 inch, all chunked at a time. And whatever happened at 60 feet is where it juxtaposed somewhere between 450 feet to 1,000 feet below the earth. And then they don't know if it's like wonky in there, that they'll like, so it's like a Chinese finger that they have to like grab onto it. But if it's like jammed up against the wall, like they can't necessarily get it
They
around.
can't get on it.
So they'll take a camera down, televise it, and they've had like horror stories where they were here for 3 months
Fantastic.
trying to get it out. So you have 390 feet of a shaft and a pump stuck somewhere in a 6-inch thing. So it's not like a person can go down there. It's like a little mini
I think we
person.
want to send somebody 1,000 feet down anyway.
Yeah, sounds pretty scary. So televising and then hopefully whatever they find. And it was mucky at the time from all the disturbance. So hopefully because it's been sitting, they'll be able to get the camera down there when they come back, but end of summer.
So insurance covers everything but the, I mean, minus deductible?
That's the
or-
hope. It should fall under our machinery and boilery, so you protect like your equipment like that when like something fails like that, you're covered. So that's the hope, is that our out-of-pocket would be the 5,000, assuming that whoever the adjuster is agrees that it falls under our policy.
They're presently using the submersible as well as pump 5.
It's in there. So it was interesting, the guy that I talked to today thought that we were still alternating between the 2 wells. When I talked to Marty, he said that the employee, not the boss that I talked to, said that we should only use it as a backup. So right now, we're gonna have another conversation about that, but right now, we're just strictly on well 5. And then 6, the submersible pump is if anything were to happen with 5. And then once we get this one repaired, there's only a life expectancy of all that stuff for a certain number of years, and I think it's like 12 years on well 5. So the next thing that we'll have to do is take that same shaft casing and get it out and repair it on well 5, so we don't have that happen to that one. It's not that old in 6, but. So that's all I have.
Okay. Public comment, there's a limit of 3 minutes per person, only items on this agenda. Seeing none, I need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion by Kelchen,
Okay.
second by Delaney. All in favor?
Aye.